So this YouTube channel is for you. Yes, you, the people, the amazing subscribers of the channel, and the 70% of you who just lurk around watching the channel and don't actually subscribe. You see, I quickly realized a while ago that the videos I enjoy creating, by adding some storytelling elements and some sick edits, at least in my opinion, aren't the kind of videos that you guys like to see. So I figured rather than please myself, poor choice of words, I'd rather give the viewers what they want. Now, a fair few of you have asked me about bridging finance and buying properties with cash and the benefits, etc. So what I'm going to actually do for this particular video is run through exactly that. And in case you're impatient and want to jump straight to one particular part of the video, then here are today's timestamps, which will also be conveniently placed along the bottom. So we're going to look at what is a bridge, obviously in property, the charges and costs associated in regards to a bridge, what are the pros of using a bridge. Then we're going to obviously look at what are the cons in terms of using a bridge, when you should and when you shouldn't use a bridge. I think that's very, very important as well. And why you should all subscribe. Well, actually, that's not actually part of the video. It's more just a nice thing that you can all do. And then finally, we're going to end it with the bloopers. So fortunate for yourselves, I've actually done bridging finance myself. So let's get started. So effectively, a bridge is basically a short-term loan with higher interest rates that can help people with purchasing properties either to renovate and sell or renovate to rent out. But that's not the only thing. You see, it can also be used if you want to maybe buy a new home but you're currently sat waiting to sell your current one, i.e. you're stuck in a chain. So that's also a very, very common reason as well. So effectively, it basically bridges the gap between those waiting on a property transaction to go through. However, more for probably yourselves and especially for myself as a property investor, it's far more commonly used to acquire properties or sites that we want to develop, that we want to add value to, with a potential exit in mind of refinancing or selling. Now, there's two types of popular bridge loans that you may be familiar with or may not. The first is an open bridge loan, which basically has no set date for when it can actually be paid and is settled when the funds become available, i.e. you sell that house that you're sitting on. And the average duration for this is about 12 months. The second is a closed bridging loan. Now these have a fixed ending date and they're provided based on you knowing when you can pay that loan back. And the duration for these can be weeks or it can be months. So when you take out a bridge, the lender, i.e. the bridging company, will add a charge to the property. And the idea behind a charge is that it gives the lender security should you ever default and you can't make your payments or something goes wrong. And these charges are generally set in terms of priority of who will be paid back first if something goes wrong, i.e. you default. And yes, you would be the last person to be paid back. So effectively, a first charge against a property you may be familiar with could be your current mortgage lender. That if something goes wrong, they get paid first. If you don't pay your mortgage, they're taking your home. A second charge, on the other hand, sits just underneath that. And this is where there's already a charge existing, but they still need some security. Generally speaking, you will need to get permission from the person who's got the first charge, i.e. the main lender, in order to add a second charge. But effectively, then what happens is the first charge gets paid, the second charge, and then most likely yourself, you get paid last. Now, the costs in relation to a bridge, well, they can range from like 0.4% to even more than 2% a month, and often have a lot of fees attached, such as an arrangement fee or facility fees, exit fees, legal fees, administration fees, valuation fees, broker fees, and there's probably a few more that I've actually forgot to mention. So there's a lot of fees. So you really need to weigh up the total cost of the entry and exit, as well as the holding of a bridge, and not just focus entirely on the interest rate. For example, a 1% a month with less fees on entry and exit could actually be cheaper and more enticing than a 0.4% per month, which actually smashes you on the fees when you exit or enter. So make sure you do the maths. And just quickly before I move on, another important point that I think I should raise is there's three main ways that bridges can be paid back. So the first is retained, i.e. you borrow the interest for an agreed set time and pay it back at the end of the loan. The second is a rolled up one. You don't have any monthly charges and you pay the interest at the end of the bridge. And the third is monthly. You basically pay the interest every single month and it's not added to the actual loan that you take out. So now let's look at the pros. The first is they're very quick. When you compare it to a normal standard mortgage or a buy to let, if you need to move on something swiftly, i.e. auctions or corporate sales that need to be quickly sorted, then bridges are perfect. The next one, they can work as a second or even a third charge on some basis too, so they're quite flexible. The third one is that you can actually, in some circumstances, if the deal's a great one or you have some great experience and you don't look like too much of a risk, you can actually get 100% bridging loans. Also, a final one is that the more you do bridging and the more that you pay him back and you show that you're a good investor, you can actually get preferential rates too, which is very, very useful. And now for the cons. So obviously the first one, the most common one, is there's very high interest rates. They're a lot more expensive than your normal mortgages or any sort of loans that you take out. On average, as a rule of thumb, let's just say around 1% a month. Also, there's loads of fees, all of those that I literally mentioned earlier, which are often forgotten about and can massively destroy your margins. Then we have the risk of not paying them back. If you don't pay them back, they're gonna take the asset. Now, my personal stance on this is if this ever happens and maybe you're running over, and I know last year posed a lot of problems with projects going slightly longer than they were expected, have an honest word with your bridging company. Let them know what's going on, because as scary as it is that they could literally take your property away, from my perspective and speaking with a lot of brokers, is they would rather work with you and then you have to pay an extra few months of interest rather than actually go down the whole route of repossession, which takes absolutely ages. So please don't panic. I'd rather you pay a few more extra months of interest rather than worry about losing everything entirely. Now, a common question is when you should use it and when you shouldn't. And just before I close, here are some thoughts on when you should actually use a bridge. The first is they serve a purpose if you're after an uninhabitable home, i.e. there's no water or heating, or it just looks a complete wreck. This is a perfect bridging opportunity, of course, if the numbers work. The next is it can and it should also be used if you're obviously short of the full finance. So when I first purchased this property here, I had about £40,000, but I didn't have the rest of it to buy it for 96,000 and to renovate it, which I think it was around 15,000, and a bridge helped bridge that gap. Now, I could have potentially brought that on a buy-to-let mortgage, and this is a very, very important point. But my intention was to renovate and either flip it or refinance it. And it would have actually been wrong and unethical to potentially use a buy-to-let mortgage, and fraud too, just to simply benefit from the cheaper rates that that product offered. I had to take the hit and get a bridging loan. So as a word of warning, if you watch this channel, make sure you use the right products for the right deals. Don't get yourself caught. Now, some reasons why you probably shouldn't use a bridge. If you don't have two exits in place. Sometimes we all get caught up in the emotion of flipping homes and watching too much Homes Under the Hammer, that market conditions can absolutely change and a flip at the end may not be possible. So please make sure you have a second exit, because it's not worth the risk of taking on so much debt on a project without the adequate contingency. Also, don't take a bridge if you're likely using something like your personal home as security for the lender. Your house would be used as collateral, and I promise you, it's not worth any deal. The last thing I want from any of you is to risk your own home for a project. If you can't afford it at this time, then maybe focus on increasing your savings or raising more finance and waiting for another opportunity. I promise you there are going to be opportunities out there. And that, everyone, is pretty much the end of the video, where I now quickly ask you before you jump to another video to smash that like button if you found any of this useful, and also consider subscribing if you're new to the channel as well. And of course, the comments are always open if you have any questions in relation to what I said. So now I'm going to roll those bloopers, and I just want to thank you one more time for taking time out of your day for watching this video. Thanks for watching. Which basically has no set date for. And third, sometimes in certain circumstances, and they're normally provided based on, that's what you should be putting into your deal analysis. That's what you should be putting when you're analyzing deals. What I believe is when you should own, and what I believe, number one, they serve their purpose if you're buying an uninhabitable home or a property, and basically relies on you